The dragon was bleeding. Not visibly. Not the kind of blood that stains the floor. But the way the boarding gate went quiet when he stepped forward, that was a wound. It started with a flicker. A ripple through the terminal's ambient lighting as the transport liner Aurelian Dawn finalized boarding clearance. The luxury interstellar cruiser gleamed outside the viewport, polished hull reflecting the distant burn of a binary star. First-class passengers clustered near the priority lane, polished suits, jeweled horns, diplomatic crests, synthetic silks that shimmered in controlled gravity. Then the dragon arrived. He moved slowly. Massive frame. Burn scars tracing one wing joint. Left horn chipped at the tip. Old military insignia sewn carefully onto a dark formal coat that had been repaired more times than replaced. Conversations thinned. Whispers replaced laughter. He can't fit in economy. They'll have to upgrade him. I paid for this seat months ago. The gate attendant swallowed visibly as her tablet pulsed red. Attention, passengers, she began carefully. Due to a seating conflict, we are currently one first-class seat over capacity. The silence thickened. The dragon did not speak. He simply stood there, dignified, patient, ancient eyes steady. A decorated crest rested on his chest. Most didn't recognize it. But they recognized what he was. Old. Powerful once. Now inconvenient. The attendant cleared her throat. Would any first-class passenger be willing to volunteer their seat for reassignment? No one moved. Not the corporate magnate adjusting his platinum cufflinks. Not the young influencer streaming discreetly to her followers. Not the off-duty security commander pretending to scroll. The dragon shifted slightly, careful not to brush anyone with his wing. I can take economy, he said quietly. His voice carried warmth and fatigue. The attendant shook her head quickly. Sir, with respect, your size classification. It's fine, someone muttered from the line. He doesn't need luxury. A few nodded. No one stepped forward. At the edge of the boarding group, a human mechanic adjusted the strap of his worn duffel bag. His name was Daniel Mercer. His hands were calloused, knuckles faintly scarred from plasma-wrench slips and microweld burns. His boots were polished, but old. His jacket still carried faint traces of orbital dock grease despite his best effort. He didn't belong in this line. The first-class ticket had been a performance bonus from the Ceres Orbital Repair Authority. 3 years without a missed inspection. 0 fatal errors. 0 delays. He had stared at the ticket for an hour before accepting it. He'd never flown first class. He'd wanted to see what it felt like. Daniel looked at the dragon. Not at the wings. Not at the scars. At the metals. One of them was slightly melted at the edge. Daniel exhaled once. Then he stepped forward. You can take mine, he said. The attendant blinked. Sir. Daniel held out his boarding pass. Switch us. A ripple moved through the crowd. You serious? You know what those seats cost? Probably doesn't even know who that is. Daniel shrugged slightly. Doesn't matter. The dragon turned his head slowly toward him. Their eyes met. Ancient gold met steady brown. You would surrender comfort for a stranger? The dragon asked. Daniel scratched the back of his neck. My old man served in the belt conflicts. Said respect's not about rank. It's about who carried the weight before you. A pause. Something unreadable passed across the dragon's face. The attendant processed the exchange quickly, issuing new digital tags. Seat 2A reassigned, she confirmed softly. Daniel's new assignment blinked on his wristband. Economy. Last row. Near the sanitation unit. He didn't flinch. As boarding resumed, murmurs followed him. Idiot. Waste. Humans always trying to be dramatic. Daniel slung his duffel over his shoulder and walked down the ramp without looking back. Halfway through the boarding corridor, a junior flight attendant hurried forward and lowered her voice. Sir, do you even know who that dragon is? Daniel adjusted his jacket cuff. No, he said honestly. Should I? The attendant hesitated. That's General Kale Virex. The name meant nothing to Daniel. She stared at him, stunned. He held the Virex corridor alone during the border collapse. Burned his own wings shielding civilian transports. He's the reason 3 sectors still exist. Daniel blinked once. Then nodded slowly. Here. He continued walking. Behind him, in first class, the veteran dragon paused before taking his new seat. For the first time since entering the terminal. He smiled. And across the cabin, more than one passenger began quietly searching a name they should have remembered. As the hatch sealed and the Aurelian Dawn prepared for departure, the dragon's gaze shifted toward the rear of the vessel. Toward economy. Toward the human who had stood up when no one else would. And somewhere deep in the ship's core, something mechanical hummed slightly out of rhythm. No one noticed. Except the mechanic. Daniel's head tilted subtly. His brow furrowed. That vibration. That wasn't normal. The engine spooled for warp. The stars outside stretched thin. And Daniel Mercer, now seated beside the sanitation unit, felt a chill run down his spine. Because he knew that sound. And it meant trouble. The vibration wasn't loud. That was the problem. Most passengers felt it as nothing more than background tremor, the normal hum of a starliner pushing toward warp threshold. The Aurelian Dawn was a luxury vessel. Smooth. Polished. Engineered so precisely that even atmospheric reentry felt like silk. But Daniel Mercer had spent 11 years crawling through ships that were smooth. He knew the difference between normal vibration and a harmonic imbalance. He closed his eyes for a second in the last row of economy. Counted the pulses. 1, 2, 3. There. A stutter on the fourth oscillation. Too tight. Too sharp. Somewhere in the aft engine housing, a stabilizer brace was compensating harder than it should. Daniel leaned back slowly. He could ignore it. Not his ship. Not his responsibility. The sanitation unit beside him hissed unpleasantly. A businessman across the aisle muttered, "Still can't believe that Dragon got first class." Daniel didn't answer. Up in first class, silence sat differently. General Cale Virex folded his wings carefully to avoid crowding the aisle. The upgraded seating had been reinforced automatically for his mass profile, but the attendants still moved with cautious deference. Some passengers avoided eye contact. Others stole glances. One young corporate heir discreetly searched his name. Her screen illuminated. Images appeared. A war-torn corridor of stars. Burning cruisers. A single dragon silhouetted against missile fire. Headline, "The Last Flame of Virex." She swallowed. The images were older than she expected. Cale Virex in his prime, massive, wings unscarred, fire blazing white-hot. Then the next image. After. Wings burned down to expose structure. Left horn broken. Standing anyway. Her hand trembled slightly as she read. He had held a collapsing evacuation corridor alone for 19 minutes while civilian transports escaped through unstable warp gates. 19 minutes against a fleet. No retreat. No reinforcement. He'd burned his own flight membranes to create a plasma barrier. He survived. Barely. The air slowly lowered her device. Across the cabin, another passenger whispered, "Why is he flying commercial?" Because war heroes get old, she thought. And the galaxy forgets. Cale Virex adjusted the metal on his chest. The metal edge was warped slightly from heat. He never repaired that part. It reminded him. The engine pitch shifted. Subtle. But he noticed. So did the human in the back. Daniel leaned forward slightly. The stutter worsened as the warp drive began phase alignment. He frowned. That wasn't just a brace. That was coolant flow compensation. Meaning either a valve lag. Or a microfracture. His jaw tightened. He stood. The businessman beside him scoffed. Bathrooms that way. Daniel ignored him and started walking forward. A flight attendant intercepted him gently. "Sir, please remain seated. We're about to enter warp." Daniel lowered his voice. "There's a coolant harmonic imbalance in your aft stabilizer housing." She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You're compensating at 0.4 pulse intervals instead of 0.6. That's not standard for this engine class." Her expression shifted from polite dismissal to uncertainty. Before she could respond, the entire vessel lurched. Not violently. But wrong. A metallic groan reverberated through the hull. In first class, several drinks spilled. Warning lights flickered briefly along the cabin trim. Then stabilized. Murmurs rose. Cale Virex's eyes narrowed. He stood carefully despite the turbulence. The attendants immediately rushed forward. "General, please." "Engineering," he rumbled. He felt it too. That wasn't combat damage. That was strain. Back in the aisle, Daniel exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he muttered. "That's what I thought." The intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, minor turbulence during warp alignment. Please remain calm." "Minor." Daniel shook his head. Minor didn't scrape metal like that. From first class, Cale's gaze tracked the human walking forward with steady purpose. He recognized that walk. Not arrogance. Competence. The dragon stepped into the aisle as well. Passengers parted instantly this time. He moved down the cabin toward economy. The same human who had given up comfort now stood near the midsection bulkhead, listening to the ship like a physician with a heartbeat. Kale stopped beside him. "You hear it," the dragon said quietly. Daniel nodded once. "Coolant valve lag. If it spikes under full warp load, your stabilizer's going to shear." Kale studied him carefully. "You are engineering crew?" "Orbital dock mechanic." The dragon's eyes glinted faintly. "Then why are you not in engineering?" Daniel gave him a small, almost sheepish look. "Not my ship." Another metallic groan rolled through the hull, longer this time. Several passengers gasped. The intercom voice faltered slightly. Kale's gaze hardened. "Correction," the dragon said calmly. "It is your ship now." Daniel hesitated. He had no authority. No clearance. No badge. But he knew that sound. And he knew what happened when no one acted fast enough. He looked up at the dragon. "Security's not going to like this." Kale's lips curled faintly. "Security answers to rank." He turned toward the approaching officers. "Stand aside." The officers froze at the insignia on his coat. "Yes, General." Kale stepped closer to Daniel. "Show them." Daniel inhaled once. Then started toward engineering. Behind them, in first class, passengers sat stunned. The same mechanic they'd mocked 15 minutes ago was now walking with a war legend toward the core of the ship. The engine pitch shifted again. Sharper. More urgent. Daniel quickened his pace. "If I'm right," he muttered, "we've got about 5 minutes before that stabilizer decides it's had enough." Kale's voice rumbled low beside him. "Then let us not waste them." Ahead, the engineering hatch doors loomed. And deep within the hull, something cracked. Not catastrophic. Not yet. But enough to make every veteran in the galaxy feel it in their bones. The Aurelian Dawn was in trouble. And the only two who truly understood it were walking toward the fire. The crack wasn't loud. It was precise. Like metal deciding it had tolerated enough. Daniel felt it through the soles of his boots before the warning lights ever reacted. 3 minutes, he muttered. The corridor to engineering vibrated under strain as warp alignment forced power through systems never meant to compensate this hard. Behind him, General Kale Virex moved with controlled urgency. The dragon's wings were folded tight, old scars catching the emergency lighting as it flickered from soft gold to warning amber. Security reached the engineering hatch first. "General, we can't just let a civilian." Kale's eyes flared faintly. "You can let the civilian, or you can explain to command why you stopped him." The officer hesitated only a fraction too long. The ship shuddered again. This time passengers screamed. That decided it. The hatch slid open. Heat rushed out. Engineering was chaos. Crew members scrambled between consoles as holographic readouts flashed red across the chamber. The main warp core cylinder glowed too bright, coolant streams cycling unevenly along its containment spine. Daniel didn't slow down. "Your aft stabilizer brace is compensating at 0.4 interval," he called out. The chief engineer turned sharply. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's listened to this engine model longer than you have today." Another tremor. A sharp metallic shriek echoed through the chamber. One of the junior techs shouted, "Coolant pressure dropping in segment C." Daniel's eyes snapped to the display. There. A microfracture line spidering across the stabilizer housing. Not catastrophic yet. But under warp load? It would rip. And when it did, the warp field would destabilize. Which meant either a forced drop at superluminal stress. Or worse. Daniel moved toward the console. The chief engineer blocked him instinctively. "You are not authorized." Kale stepped forward, voice low and commanding. "He is authorized." The engineer swallowed. Daniel leaned over the display, fingers moving across controls with mechanical familiarity. "You've got a valve lag at junction C17, he said rapidly. "Your autoregulator's compensating too aggressively. It's over-tightening the brace." "That's impossible," a tech snapped. Daniel pointed at the harmonic graph. "See that spike? That's not turbulence. That's stress reflection. Your system thinks it's stabilizing. It's actually amplifying." The chamber shook violently. Alarms howled. The ship lurched mid-warp, stars outside the viewport stretching unnaturally. Someone screamed over comms, structural integrity dropping. Kale braced himself against the railing, wings flaring slightly for balance despite the pain in the joints. Daniel turned to the engineer. Kill auto-regulation. We can't manually reroute coolant during warp. You can if you want the ship to stay in one piece. A half-second of hesitation. Then the engineer nodded sharply. Do it. Daniel dove into the override panel. Manual mode engaged. Instantly the warp core flared brighter, angry, unstable. Heat surged through the chamber. Coolant reroute to auxiliary spine, Daniel barked. I need access to the physical valve. That's inside the housing. I know. He grabbed a thermal shield glove from a rack and sprinted toward the maintenance ladder. A crew member shouted, "You'll cook yourself." Daniel didn't answer. He climbed. The stabilizer housing towered above the core like a rib cage of glowing metal. The microfracture was visible now, a hairline tear bleeding heat through reinforced plating. 2 minutes. Maybe less. He dropped into the narrow service shaft, heat pressing against him like a living thing. His earpiece crackled. Kale's voice. You risk much for strangers. Daniel gritted his teeth as he reached the valve wheel. My dad used to say, he muttered, wrenching it manually, if you're in the system, it's never just strangers. The valve resisted. He forced it harder. Behind him, the warp core screamed, a high-frequency whine as stress peaked. On the command deck above, officers fought to maintain heading. One shouted, unknown vessel on intercept trajectory. A pirate raider decloaked ahead of them. Of course. The warp fluctuation had drawn attention. The pirate ship locked weapons. The captain's voice trembled over ship-wide comms. We are being targeted. In engineering, no one had the spare breath to react. Daniel twisted the valve one final inch. Coolant roared through the auxiliary line. The harmonic spike flattened instantly. The stabilizer brace stopped overcompensating. The microfracture ceased spreading. Warp field stabilized. For half a second. Silence. Then the pirate vessel fired. The transport rocked violently as shields absorbed the impact. Engineering lights exploded in sparks. Daniel nearly lost his footing. Kale steadied a collapsing technician with one clawed hand. Report, the dragon demanded. Stabilizer holding, the chief engineer shouted. But shields are dropping. Daniel climbed down, pulling off the glove, forearm reddened from heat exposure. He looked at the display. Your weapons grid's tied to primary stabilization, isn't it? The engineer nodded grimly. We diverted power to hold warp. Kale's gaze sharpened. Can you give us enough power to defend ourselves? Daniel stared at the schematic. Then at the dragon. Then back at the ship. He exhaled slowly. Yeah, he said. But it's going to get uncomfortable. Another blast rocked the hull. The pirate ship charged weapons again. In engineering, Daniel stepped toward the auxiliary bypass panel. Kale moved beside him. Human, the dragon rumbled quietly. Daniel glanced up. Kale's eyes burned, not with flame. With trust. Let us make them regret this. Daniel cracked his knuckles once. Was hoping you'd say that. He slammed his hand onto the manual override. And the Aurelian Dawn prepared to bite back. The pirate ship fired again. This time the impact wasn't glancing. The Aurelian Dawn shuddered violently as the starboard shields flared white, then dimmed to a dangerous amber. On the command deck, alarms overlapped in chaotic chorus. Shields at 32%. Weapon lock confirmed. They're charging for a hull strike. In engineering, the warp core throbbed like a wounded heart. Daniel stared at the schematic projected above the auxiliary bypass panel. Power flow spidered across the display in unstable streams. Stabilizer load was holding, for now, but the grid was stretched thin. If we route offensive systems through the auxiliary spine, he said quickly, we'll drop non-essential life comfort. The chief engineer barked back, drop it. We don't need mood lighting, we need guns. Daniel shook his head. It's not lighting. It's gravity stabilizers in economy. A beat of silence. Then another explosion rocked the hull. Passengers screamed over comms. Kale Virex stepped forward, massive frame casting shadow over the console. Do it, the dragon ordered. Daniel hesitated only a fraction. Then he moved. His hands flew across manual relays, fingers adjusting flow regulators faster than the automated system ever could. He wasn't overriding recklessly. He was balancing. Redirecting auxiliary coolant to weapons capacitor, he muttered. Dropping cabin grave to 0.8 standard. Tell passengers to brace. On the command deck, the captain's voice echoed shipwide. Brace for gravity fluctuation. In economy, luggage slid. People grabbed armrests. A child cried. The pirate ship closed distance, sleek and angular, weapons glowing hot. They think we're crippled, a tactical officer whispered. Kale's eyes ignited faintly gold. Let them. In engineering, the capacitor gauge flickered upward. 5%. 8. 10. Daniel leaned closer to the panel. Come on. The warp core pulsed brighter as redirected coolant surged through improvised channels. Heat climbed. Too much and they'd fry the weapons grid entirely. Not enough and the pirate would punch straight through them. 12% weapon charge, the tactical officer reported. That's all we're getting. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. That's enough to disable engines, he said. Not destroy. Just cripple. Kale studied him. You do not seek annihilation. Daniel shook his head. We're a transport vessel. We survive. That's the win. Another pirate volley slammed into shields. Shields dropped to 19%. The captain's voice cracked slightly. We cannot take another direct hit. Kale straightened. His old wings unfolded slightly, scars catching the emergency lights. The membranes were thin in places, permanently damaged from another war, another sky. He walked toward the emergency defense conduit, a relic system few modern ships even used. General, the chief engineer began. Kale placed one clawed hand against the conduit interface. Your capacitor is insufficient alone, he said quietly. Daniel's eyes widened. You can't mean. Kale's gaze never wavered. I have one ignition left before the old fractures protest too loudly. Daniel stared at him. You'll reopen your wing scars. Kale's voice softened. I have lived long enough to fear comfort more than pain. Another blast. Shields at 11%. Daniel swallowed. All right, he said firmly. On my mark. He adjusted the capacitor flow, creating a narrow synchronization window between auxiliary power and the emergency conduit. 3 seconds, he called. On the command deck, the pirate vessel charged its main cannon. 2. Kale inhaled. Not the roaring breath of his youth. But controlled. Focused. 1. Daniel slammed the bypass lever. Kale ignited. Fire erupted, not wild, not uncontrolled, but compressed, directed straight into the conduit housing. The ship's emergency weapon system drank it greedily, amplifying the dragon's flame through refracted plasma channels. The Aurelian Dawn's forward array flared to life. 12%. Augmented. Enough. Fire, the captain shouted. A focused beam lanced across space, striking the pirate vessel's engine array dead center. Not catastrophic. Precise. The pirates' engines detonated in a controlled flare, propulsion collapsing instantly. Their weapons fizzled mid-charge as power died. The pirate ship drifted helplessly. Silence filled the void. On the transport, every alarm gradually lowered in pitch. Shields stabilized at 9%. Warp field held. Engineering quieted except for cooling metal ticking under stress. Kale staggered slightly. The fire had cost him. Daniel moved instantly, catching the dragon's forearm before he could collapse. You're not done yet, sir, Daniel said quietly. Kale gave a faint, breathless rumble that might have been a laugh. Apparently not. On the command deck, stunned silence turned into something else. Respect. Outside the viewport, a new signal blinked onto scanners. Galactic patrol signatures incoming, tactical reported. 3 patrol cruisers dropped from warp formation around them. The pirate vessel was instantly surrounded. On open comms, a patrol commander's voice filled the bridge. Transport Aurelian Dawn, we detected your distress spike. Status? The captain straightened. Stable. Pirate disabled. A pause. Then the patrol commander spoke again, voice shifting. Confirm, General Kale Virex is aboard. Kale, still steadying himself in engineering, tapped his communicator. I am present. There was no hesitation. All 3 patrol cruisers rotated slightly in synchronized maneuver. And saluted. Not with words. With formation. Inside the Aurelian Dawn, crew members watched in awe. Passengers in first class stared. In economy, those who had mocked the mechanics sat frozen. Then the patrol commander added something unexpected. Additional commendation noted, the commander said over open channel. Engineering intervention credited to civilian Daniel Mercer. On the bridge, the captain blinked. You're saluting a mechanic. The patrol commander's reply was calm. We are saluting survival. In engineering, Daniel stood awkwardly beside the dragon. Kale looked down at him. You surrendered comfort, the dragon said softly. And chose responsibility instead. Daniel shrugged slightly. Seemed like the right call. Outside, the pirate vessel drifted powerless. Inside, the transport stabilized. Fire and steel had held. And somewhere in the quiet aftermath, the passengers who had once refused to stand now stood in silence. The first thing Daniel noticed was the silence. Not the absence of alarms. Not the fading tremor of cooling metal. The different silence. The kind that follows when everyone in the room realizes they were wrong. The Aurelian Dawn drifted under patrol escort, warp engines offline for full diagnostics. The pirate vessel was secured, powerless, surrounded by disciplined galactic patrol cruisers. Inside the transport, gravity stabilized back to standard. Cabin lights warmed from emergency amber to soft white. Passengers slowly unclenched their hands from armrests. No one returned to their conversations. Word had spread quickly. The mechanic from economy. The dragon from first class. Engineering. Fire. Survival. Daniel washed coolant residue from his hands in a maintenance sink near the engineering bay. His forearm was bandaged lightly where heat had kissed too close. He stared at his reflection in the metal panel. Grease-smudged. Tired. Very aware that he did not belong in galactic news feeds. Behind him, heavy steps approached. Not rushed. Measured. General Kale Virex stopped beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. You balanced the grid without overloading primary stabilization, Kale said at last. Few fleet engineers could have done so under fire. Daniel shrugged faintly. Dock work's not glamorous. But it teaches you to listen. Kale's eyes softened. The galaxy listens to noise. It forgets to listen to structure. A crew member approached hesitantly. General. Mr. Mercer. The captain requests your presence on the bridge. Daniel blinked. Why? The crew member almost smiled. You'll see. The bridge doors parted. Every officer present stood. Not casually. Not politely. Formally. The captain stepped forward. General Virex, she began with a slight bow of her head. Mr. Mercer. Daniel shifted awkwardly. Just Daniel's fine. A faint ripple of restrained amusement passed through the officers. The main viewport displayed the patrol cruisers holding formation outside. One of them hailed again. Transport Aurelian Dawn, commendation file has been prepared. The captain glanced at Daniel. The patrol is submitting formal recognition for both of you. Daniel stiffened immediately. That's not necessary. Kale turned his head slightly. Recognition is not indulgence, the dragon said quietly. It is record. The patrol commander's image flickered onto the bridge display. Daniel Mercer, the commander said evenly. Orbital Repair Authority, Series Dockyards. 0 major citations. 0 delays. 3 commendations for structural precision. Daniel frowned. You pulled my file? We verify competence, the commander replied calmly. You prevented warp collapse and coordinated auxiliary combat output with minimal casualties. That qualifies as competence. Daniel opened his mouth to argue. Kale interrupted. There is more. The dragon reached to his chest. He unclipped the warped metal, the one with the melted edge. The bridge went utterly still. Even the patrol commander straightened slightly on screen. That decoration was issued for defensive persistence under impossible conditions, Kale said. It marked the day I decided survival mattered more than pride. He stepped closer to Daniel. And today, you reminded me why. Daniel's eyes widened. You can't just. I can, Kale replied gently. He pressed the metal into Daniel's palm. Not as transfer of rank. Not as promotion. As acknowledgement. Daniel stared at it. The metal was heavier than it looked. Warm. Scarred. And. The patrol commander spoke again. General Virex has also submitted a secondary request. Daniel looked up sharply. What request? The captain's expression softened. Elite Fleet Engineering Division, she said. They want you. Silence fell again. Daniel's heart thudded once. He had spent years in dockyards. Repairing. Maintaining. Ensuring other people's ships made it home. He had never considered stepping beyond that. Kale watched him carefully. You did not seek heroism, the dragon said. You sought function. The fleet requires more of that. Daniel hesitated. What about the dock? The dock will remain, Kale said calmly. But the galaxy grows more complicated. Daniel looked down at the medal again. Then back at the viewport. Patrol cruisers. The transport. The pirate vessel adrift. Passengers who once would not stand now watching from corridor monitors. He exhaled slowly. "I don't want interviews," he said firmly. The captain nodded immediately. "Granted." "No ceremonies." The patrol commander inclined his head. "Accepted." Daniel looked at Kale. "Just let me work." For the first time since boarding, the veteran dragon smiled fully. "That," Kale said quietly, "is precisely why they asked." When the Aurelian Dawn resumed course hours later, the seating chart remained unchanged. Daniel returned to economy. He chose it. No one protested. No one laughed. Some even nodded respectfully as he passed. In first class, the empty seat beside Kale remained untouched. The dragon did not request it filled. As the stars stretched once more into warp light, Kale's gaze drifted toward the rear cabin. Toward the mechanic who had stood when others would not. The galaxy had once feared dragonfire. It had once celebrated spectacle. But today it had witnessed something quieter. More enduring. A human who chose respect over luxury. Responsibility over recognition. Function over fame. And because of that choice, 2 lives had changed. One openly. One quietly. The patrol commander filed the final report under a simple classification update. Humanity, strategic persistent species. No fanfare. No broadcast. Just record. And in the hum of the warp engine, steady now, balanced perfectly, Daniel Mercer listened. Not for applause. For structure. Because heroes weren't always the ones in first class. Sometimes. They were the ones who stood up first.